The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any civilization in known space. It floated in the void between stars, a massive sphere of crystal and light that could hold representatives from over 1,000 species. Today, only 47 delegations had gathered, but the matter before them would change the course of galactic history forever. Ambassador. Linda Price stood alone at the human delegation's platform. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a simple style and eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures to count. For 20 years, she had worked to build relationships with alien civilizations. She had learned their languages, studied their customs, and tried to show them that humanity was worthy of a place among the stars. None of it had. Mattered High Arbiter Veltarok raised his crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent. He was ancient, even by the standards of his species, a being of living crystal whose body had grown cloudy with age. His voice echoed through translation matrices that converted his words into 1,000 different languages. The Council has reached its decision regarding the species known as humanity, he announced. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, we find that Earth and its inhabitants pose an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Linda felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. She had expected this. The signs had been clear for months. Humanity is hereby sentenced to permanent exile, Veltarok continued. A quarantine barrier shall be erected around their solar system. No member species shall have contact with Earth. No trade shall be permitted. No communication shall be allowed. Humanity will be removed from all galactic records. They will cease to exist as far as the Council is concerned. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked satisfied. Others seemed uncomfortable with the harsh judgment, but none spoke against it. Linda stepped forward. May I ask the Council's reasoning for this decision? The Valkyrie delegate spoke next. Its body was made of constantly shifting geometric shapes, and its voice sounded like wind through broken glass. Your species is too dangerous. In merely 300 years of space travel, you have spread to 17 star systems. You build weapons that frighten even the warrior races. You breed faster than any species we have recorded. You adapt to environments that should kill you. You are a virus ambassador, Price, a disease that must be contained before it infects the entire galaxy. The Drathkul delegate, a creature of shadow and cold fire, added its voice. We have watched your kind since you first reached beyond your world. We hoped you would learn peace. Instead, you brought war to every planet you touched. Your history is written in blood. We have changed, Linda said. Humanity has matured. We seek only peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. You have not changed, the Valkyrie responded. You have merely learned to hide your true nature. But we see you, Ambassador. We see what you are, and we will not allow you to spread your violence across the stars. Linda looked around the chamber. She saw fear in eyes that belonged to species commanding fleets of thousands. She saw hatred from civilizations that had existed for millions of years. She saw that no argument she could make would change their minds. They had already decided what humanity was. Nothing would convince them otherwise. Something shifted inside her in that moment. A weight she had carried for decades lifted from her shoulders. She had spent her entire career trying to prove that humanity deserved acceptance. Now she understood that acceptance had never been possible. The Council had feared humanity from the first moment of contact. Everything since then had been a slow march toward this inevitable conclusion. Very well, she said, her voice steady and calm. We accept your verdict. The chamber went quiet. The delegates had expected anger. They had expected threats and demands. They had prepared for the possibility of violence. Instead, the human ambassador simply gathered her documents and turned to leave. You accept? Veltarok asked, clearly confused. You do not wish to appeal. You do not wish to argue? Linda paused at the door and looked back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. What would be the point? You have made your decision. We will honor it. She walked out of the chamber without another word. The doors closed behind her, and she allowed herself a small smile that no one could see. On Earth, The news spread within hours. Every network carried the story. Every social platform exploded with reactions. Humanity had been cast out of the galactic community, sentenced to permanent isolation in their home system. President Daniel Cooper addressed the United Nations in an emergency session. He was a tall man with graying hair and a Texas accent that became stronger when he was angry. Today, his accent was very strong indeed. "They think they have beaten us," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly hall. "They think that by building a wall around our solar system, they can forget we exist. They think we will rage against our cage, beat ourselves bloody against the bars, and eventually accept our fate." He paused, looking out at the assembled leaders of Earth. "They have made a terrible mistake. They have forgotten what humanity does when someone tells us we cannot go somewhere. We find another way." In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. Instead of protesting the exile, humanity went quiet. The few human outposts beyond the Sol system were peacefully evacuated. Human ships returned to Earth and did not leave again. Communications with alien species stopped entirely. The Galactic Council congratulated themselves on a problem solved. The dangerous species had been contained. The galaxy was safe. They did not notice the changes happening on Earth. They did not see the orbital shipyards working around the clock, producing vessels unlike anything humanity had built before. They did not observe the massive construction projects hidden on the dark side of the moon. They did not detect the strange energy readings coming from deep beneath the Antarctic ice. They did not understand that humanity had not accepted exile at all. They had simply stopped caring about the galaxy's opinion in a secret facility beneath the Nevada desert. A team of scientists worked on a project that would have seemed like magic to any other species. They were not trying to break through the quarantine barrier. They were not building weapons to fight the Council fleets. They were doing something far more ambitious. They were building a door to somewhere else entirely. Dr. Patricia Lane, the project's lead scientist, stood before a shimmering portal that bent light in ways that hurt the eyes. She had spent 10 years on this project, sacrificing everything else in her life to make it work. "How long until we're ready?" asked General Howard Blake, the military liaison for the project. Patricia smiled. 5 years. Maybe less if we push hard and you're certain it works. We can actually travel to another dimension. Not travel, Patricia corrected. Step. We won't be moving through space at all. We'll be stepping around it, into a place where the Council's barriers mean nothing, a place where their ships cannot follow, a place where humanity can finally be free. Howard looked at the portal, then back at the scientist. "The Council thinks they've trapped us." "The Council has no idea what they've done," Patricia replied. "They wanted us contained. Instead, they've given us the greatest motivation in human history. They've made us desperate enough to achieve the impossible." Outside, the stars shone down on a world preparing for the greatest journey in human history. The exile had been meant as a punishment. It would become humanity's liberation. 5 years passed like a held breath. On the surface, Earth seemed to accept its exile. Cities continued their daily routines. People went to work, raised families, and lived their lives. But beneath that calm surface, the greatest project in human history was reaching completion. Kevin Marsh was 28 years old when he first entered Facility 7. He was a young engineer, fresh from the best university on Earth, recruited for a project so secret that even his family did not know it existed. When the elevator descended 2 miles beneath the Nevada desert and the doors opened onto the main control center, he understood that everything he thought he knew about human technology was wrong. The chamber was vast, carved from solid rock and filled with machines that hummed with energies he could not name. Hundreds of technicians moved between workstations, monitoring systems that displayed data in formats he had never seen. At the center of it all stood the portal, a ring of metal and crystal that bent reality around itself. Like water swirling down a drain, Dr. Patricia Lane met him at the entrance. She was smaller than he had imagined, with wire-rimmed glasses and gray streaks in her dark hair. But her eyes burned with an intensity that made him take a step back. "You must be the new systems coordinator," she said. "Welcome to Project Exodus. Everything you learned in school is about to become useless." Over the following months, Kevin learned the truth about the fold drive. The Galactic Council used quantum tunneling for their faster-than-light travel. It was efficient and reliable, but it only worked along mapped routes through normal space. The fold drive was different. It did not travel through space at all. It created a doorway to another dimension entirely, a place the scientists called the fold. The fold was not empty. It contained stars and planets, matter and energy, but arranged in ways that normal physics could not explain. Colors existed there that human eyes had never seen. Time flowed differently depending on where you stood. It was strange and terrifying and beautiful beyond words, and it was completely outside the reach of the Galactic Council. They can't follow us, Patricia explained during one of their late-night work sessions. Their technology cannot detect the fold, much less access it. Once we leave, we'll be beyond their reach forever. What about Earth? Kevin asked. What happens to the people who stay behind? Patricia's face grew serious. Not everyone wants to leave. Some people have lived their entire lives here. They want to stay and tend the world that gave birth to our species. We're making provisions for them. Automated systems to maintain infrastructure. Defensive platforms to discourage any council aggression. Enough supplies to last generations. They'll be safe, but alone. They made their choice, just as we're making ours. Freedom means accepting the consequences of your decisions. Above ground, the evacuation was proceeding according to plan. Massive ships, built in secret facilities across the planet, were being loaded with colonists. Each vessel carried thousands of people, along with genetic archives, manufacturing databases, cultural records, and everything else needed to rebuild human civilization from nothing. The scale of the operation was staggering. Nearly 9 billion people had chosen to leave Earth. They came from every nation, every culture, every background imaginable. They spoke hundreds of languages and practiced thousands of different customs. But they shared one thing in common. They refused to accept exile as their fate. Captain Sandra Webb stood on the bridge of the endless horizon. The flagship of the Exodus fleet. She was 52 years old. A former naval officer who had volunteered for this mission knowing she might never see Earth again. The ship was 3 kilometers long and carried 200,000 passengers in cryogenic sleep chambers. It was the largest vessel humanity had ever built, and it was just one of thousands. All ships report ready for fold transition, her communications officer announced. Sandra looked at the view screen, showing Earth one last time. The blue marble that had nurtured humanity for hundreds of thousands of years, the cradle that had given them life, sheltered them through ice ages and disasters, and finally pushed them out into the stars. She felt tears forming in her eyes, but blinked them away. "Send the final message," she ordered. The message was broadcast on every frequency the Council might detect. It was simple and short, containing only 6 words. "Thank you for setting us free." Then the fold drives activated. Kevin watched from the control center as reality bent around the fleet. The ships did not accelerate or move in any conventional sense. They simply twisted, colors shifting through spectrums that had no names, and then they were somewhere else. One moment, thousands of vessels orbited Earth. The next moment, they were gone. The Galactic Council detected the energy signature within hours. They sent probes to Earth to investigate. What they found confused them deeply. The planet was not empty. Approximately 500 million humans remained, tending automated systems and going about their lives. But when the Council asked where the rest of their species had gone, the remaining humans simply smiled and said nothing. Search parties were dispatched to every system humanity had ever visited. Ships scanned every corner of known space. The Council interrogated their allies and enemies alike, demanding to know if anyone was hiding the missing humans. They found nothing. Nearly 9 billion people had vanished without a trace. In the fold, the Exodus fleet emerged into a dimension of wonder and terror. Stars burned with impossible colors. Nebulas formed shapes that seemed almost alive. The laws of physics bent and twisted in ways that made the scientists weep with joy and fear Sandra. Webb looked out at this new universe and felt something she had not felt since childhood. She felt hope. "Begin survey operations," she ordered. "Find us a home." The search took 18 months of subjective time. The fold was vast, filled with countless stars and planets, most of them hostile to human life. But eventually, the scouts found what they were looking for. The planet was slightly larger than Earth. Orbiting a stable yellow sun in a system rich with resources, its climate was temperate, its atmosphere breathable, with minor modifications. And its native life was primitive enough to pose no threat. They named it Haven, and it became the first foothold of human civilization in a new dimension. Back in normal space, the Galactic Council continued their search for years, then decades, then centuries. They never found even a hint of where humanity had gone. The Exile species had simply stepped out of the known universe and closed the door behind them. "Hi, Arbiter Veltarek." Growing old and confused, often wondered what had happened to the dangerous species his council had tried to contain. Sometimes late at night, he thought he could hear laughter echoing across the void between stars. Humanity was free, and they were just getting started. Haven was beautiful in ways that Earth had never been. Its sunsets painted the sky in shades of purple and gold that seemed to glow from within. Its oceans were crystal clear, filled with strange creatures that had never learned to fear humans. Its mountains rose higher than any on Earth, their peaks touching clouds that shimmered with colors from another spectrum entirely. Within a decade of landing, the first cities began to rise. Sandra Webb, now Admiral of the Haven Defense Force, watched from her office as construction drones assembled the latest orbital platform. She was 62 years old, her hair completely white now, but her eyes still held the same determination that had carried her through the Exodus. Through her window, she could see the capital city of New Hope spreading across the valley below. Home to nearly 10 million people and growing every day, her aide, a young officer named Christopher Dale, entered with the morning reports. He was 25 years old, born during the Exodus itself, one of the first generation to never know Earth's sun. "The dimensional survey teams have mapped another 12 stable transit points," he said. "We're finding more connections to normal space every month. Also, the colony on Frontier reports successful harvest of the new grain variants. They'll be self-sufficient within 2 years." Sandra nodded, scanning the reports. "And our observers in normal space?" Christopher hesitated. "The Council has strengthened the barrier around Sol again. They've been doing it every few years since we left. Our remote probes suggest they've become paranoid about our disappearance. There are factions calling for a strike against the remaining Earth population." "They won't do it," Sandra said. "Attacking Earth would accomplish nothing except making them look afraid. And they are afraid, aren't they?" "Yes, Admiral. Very afraid." That fear had shaped galactic politics for 50 years. The Council species spent enormous resources searching for the missing humans. They built early warning systems at the edges of their territory. They formed new alliances and created new weapons. They had convinced themselves that humanity would return someday. Angry and vengeful, ready to destroy everything they had built. They were right about one thing. Humanity would return, but not for revenge. In the research districts of New Hope, scientists were making discoveries that would have taken centuries in normal space. The fold operated on different physical principles than the universe they had left behind. Energy could be extracted from sources that did not exist back home. Materials could be formed that violated the laws of conventional physics. The human body itself could be modified in ways that extended life and enhanced ability. Dr. Patricia Lane, now 78 years old but appearing no older than 50 thanks to those same medical advances, led a team studying the nature of the fold itself. Her laboratory occupied an entire building near the center of the city. "We've confirmed that the fold is not a separate universe," she explained to a gathering of government officials. "It's more like a space between universes, a layer beneath normal reality that connects everything. In theory, we could open doorways to any point in normal space, or even to other dimensions entirely." "Could we return to the Council's galaxy?" asked Secretary of State Marcus Grant. Patricia smiled. "We could return tomorrow if we wanted. But I suggest we wait. Let them wonder for a few more generations. Let them build up their defenses and strain their economies. When we finally reveal ourselves, I want them to understand just how far we've surpassed them. The decision to wait was not universally popular. Some humans wanted to go back immediately, to show the Council that Exile had been a mistake. Others wanted to forget the galaxy entirely and focus on building their new civilization. But the government chose a middle path. They would develop quietly, spreading across the fold, and preparing for the day they would make contact again. That preparation took many forms. Military forces trained for scenarios that might never happen. Diplomats studied council cultures from captured records. Engineers designed ships that could operate in both the fold and normal space. Teachers educated new generations about the history they had left behind, and throughout all of it, humanity continued to grow and change. The children of the Exodus were different from their parents. They had grown up in the strange light of fold stars, breathed air that carried subtle differences from Earth's atmosphere. Their eyes adapted to see colors that did not exist in normal space. Their minds processed information in patterns that would have confused their ancestors. They were still human, but they were also something new. Lisa Park was 18 years old, born on Haven, part of the second generation to never see Earth. She was studying to be a dimensional engineer, learning to build and maintain the fold gates that connected human colonies across their new home. Her professor, an elderly man named Professor Harold Davis, who had been an adult during the Exodus, often spoke about the world they had left behind. "You young people don't understand what it was like," he said during one class. "We were afraid all the time. Afraid of the Council. Afraid of our own technology. Afraid of what we might become." The Exile freed us from that fear. Lisa raised her hand. "But aren't we supposed to go back someday? Aren't we supposed to show them what we've become?" Professor Davis smiled sadly. "That's for your generation to decide. We built this civilization so you would have options your parents never had. You can stay here, safe in the fold, building a future without interference from anyone. Or you can return to normal space and face whatever waits there. What would you choose?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. "I think about Earth sometimes. I remember the way the sun felt on my face, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the sound of waves on a beach. I miss those things. But I don't miss the fear. I don't miss being told that humanity was too dangerous to exist among the stars." He looked out the window at the purple sky of Haven. "I think you'll go back. It's in our nature to prove ourselves, to show the people who rejected us that they were wrong. But when you do, remember why we left. Remember that we're not looking for approval anymore. We're not asking permission to exist. We're simply showing them who we've become." Across the fold, in dozens of colonies and hundreds of stations, similar conversations were happening. A new generation was coming of age, curious about the universe their grandparents had abandoned. They had heard stories about Earth, about the Council, about the Exile. Now, they wanted to see for themselves. The time for hiding was almost over. Humanity was ready to step back into the light. 200 years after the Exodus, a single human ship appeared at the edge of the Valkyrie home system. It emerged from nowhere, materializing out of empty space, like a ghost stepping through a wall. The vessel was small by human standards, barely half a kilometer long, but its hull gleamed with materials the Valkyrie sensors could not identify. Within minutes, every alarm in the system was screaming. Captain Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Messenger, watching through the view screen as 300 Valkyrie warships surrounded his vessel. He was 32 years old, tall and lean, with the subtle modifications that had become standard among his people. His eyes carried an unusual shimmer, a side effect of growing up under fold light, and his reflexes were faster than any unmodified human could match. "Human vessel. You have violated the terms of your species, Exile," the Valkyrie fleet commander broadcast. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction."
Ow.
Nathan smiled and opened a channel. "Fleet Commander, I am Captain Nathan Cole of the Haven Diplomatic Corps. I am not in violation of any treaty. The Exile decree applied to Earth and its solar system. We are not from Earth. Silence stretched across the communication frequency. Nathan could imagine the confusion spreading through the Valkyrie command structure. 2 centuries of paranoia were colliding with something they had never expected. "Explain yourself immediately," the commander finally demanded. "Humanity left Earth 200 years ago. We have built a new civilization in a dimension your sensors cannot detect. We have developed technologies your scientists will spend generations trying to understand. We have returned not as exiles seeking forgiveness, but as representatives of a sovereign nation requesting formal diplomatic relations." He paused to let those words sink in. "We have no quarrel with the Valkyrie, or any member of the Galactic Council. The exile was, in a way, a gift. It forced us to become something new. We would like to share what we've learned with the galaxy if the galaxy is willing to receive us as equals." The news spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Humanity had returned. Not as refugees begging for readmission, but as something entirely unexpected. A civilization that had developed independently for 2 centuries, beyond the reach of Council influence. A civilization that appeared and disappeared at will, using technology that defied everything the galaxy knew about physics. High Arbiter Veltarok the Younger, grandson of the Arbiter who had pronounced humanity's exile, called an emergency session of the Council. The chamber had not seen such tension since the original exile vote. "We must respond to this development carefully," he addressed the assembled delegates. "The species we banished no longer exists. In its place stands something we do not understand." The Drathkol representative, a creature of shadow that had opposed humanity since first contact, spoke with barely contained fury. "They mock us. They return wearing our shame like a badge of honor. We should destroy their ship and every human who dares to show themselves in our space." "And how do you propose we do that?" asked the Valkyrie delegate. "Their ship appeared from nowhere and can presumably disappear the same way. Our weapons may be useless against their technology. We do not even know how many of them exist or where they are." Arguments raged through the chamber. Some demanded immediate war. Others urged caution. Still others suggested opening negotiations, recognizing that conflict with an enemy who could strike from anywhere might be unwinnable. While the council debated, Nathan Cole and his crew began the real work they had come to do. Small probes were launched from the messenger, each one carrying instructions for building a fold gate. They scattered across council space, attaching themselves to asteroids and derelict stations, places where they would not be noticed. Within months, the first gates activated. They were simple structures, rings of metal that opened doorways to the fold. Any ship could pass through them, traveling instantly to Haven space and back. The Council had no way to stop it because they did not understand how the technology worked. Trade began almost immediately. Species who had been curious about humanity for centuries finally had a chance to meet them. Merchants discovered that Haven manufactured goods using methods that were cheaper and more efficient than anything in Council space. Scientists found willing partners for research that would have been forbidden under Council regulations. The old order was beginning to crack. Ambassador Rachel Kim had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She was 60 years old, a diplomat trained specifically to handle first contact with Council species. Her office on Haven received delegations from dozens of worlds, all of them eager to establish relations with the mysterious humans. "They're afraid of us," she observed during a meeting with the Haven government. "Not the healthy fear you feel toward a potential enemy. This is deeper. They're afraid of what we represent." "What do we represent?" asked President Samuel Wright. "Change. The Council has maintained galactic order for millions of years. They have rules and traditions and hierarchies that everyone follows. We don't follow their rules. We don't fit into their hierarchy. We exist outside their system entirely, and we're thriving. That terrifies them. Should we use that fear?" Rachel shook her head. "Fear makes people do stupid things. We don't want to push them into a war they think they're losing. We want to show them that there's a better way." That approach guided human policy over the following decades. Instead of threatening the Council, humanity simply offered alternatives. Want faster-than-light travel without Council transit fees? Use our fold gates. Want medical technology that extends life by centuries? Come to our hospitals. Want education that doesn't require approval from ancient bureaucracies? Attend our universities. One by one, species began to question why they needed the Council at all. The Kelvari were the first to officially join the Haven Accord. They were a small species, conquered by the Council millennia ago, and treated as second-class citizens ever since. When they announced their withdrawal from Council membership and alliance with humanity, the political earthquake spread across the galaxy. Within a decade, 20 more species had followed, then 50, then 100. Nathan Cole, now an admiral, commanding the largest human fleet in normal space, watched from his flagship as the galaxy transformed around him. He thought about his grandparents, who had been children during the Exodus. They had grown up hearing stories about Earth and the Exile. They had dreamed of the day humanity would return to prove themselves. Was it worth it? His first officer asked. 200 years of hiding, just to come back and do this? Nathan considered the question carefully. We didn't hide. We grew. We became something the Council never imagined was possible. If we had stayed and fought the Exile, we would have lost. We might have destroyed ourselves in the process. Instead, we built something new, something better. He gestured toward the view screen, where a dozen Council species were peacefully trading with human merchants. This isn't revenge. This is just showing them what they could have had if they'd given us a chance. Now they get to choose whether to join us or keep clinging to a system that's already falling apart. The choice, as it turned out, was not difficult for most species. The Council had ruled through tradition and fear for too long. When presented with an alternative, they rushed to embrace it. 300 years after the Exile, the galaxy had become something unrecognizable. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Where once it had commanded the loyalty of thousands of species, now barely 100 remained. The rest had joined the Haven Accord, the alliance built by humanity and open to anyone who wanted to be part of it. There were no conquered peoples in the Accord, no second-class citizens, no ancient traditions that determined who could speak and who must remain silent. Admiral Victoria Shaw stood in the observation deck of Unity Station, a massive structure orbiting Earth itself. The quarantine barriers had been dismantled decades ago, and the cradle of humanity had been restored to its former beauty. Forests covered continents that had once been barren. Oceans teemed with life that had been nearly extinct when the Exodus departed. The planet looked healthier than it had in thousands of years. Billions of humans had returned to their ancestral home. Billions more remained scattered across the fold in normal space, building lives on hundreds of different worlds. They were no longer a single civilization confined to one planet. They were an idea, a way of living, that had spread across dimensions. Beside Victoria stood Ambassador Veltarok the Younger, an old being whose crystalline form had grown beautiful with age. His grandfather had pronounced humanity's exile. His father had lived in fear of their return. He had chosen a different path. My grandfather's final words were about your species, Veltarok said. He told me he had made a terrible mistake. Not the exile itself, which he still believed was necessary at the time, but the assumptions behind it. He assumed that containing humanity would solve the problem. He never imagined you would simply leave. Victoria nodded slowly. We surprised ourselves, to be honest. Most humans expected to fight the exile. The idea of just walking away seemed like surrender. But it wasn't surrender. No, it was freedom. For the first time in our history, we had no one to prove ourselves to except ourselves. No alien civilizations judging our every action. No ancient powers deciding whether we were worthy of existence. We could finally figure out who we really wanted to be. Below them, ships from 100 different species moved through Unity Station's docking bays. Some were traders carrying goods between the fold and normal space. Others were tourists coming to see the legendary birthplace of the species that had changed the galaxy. Still others were diplomats, scientists, artists, and dreamers. All drawn by the promise of something new. The Haven Accord was not an empire. It did not conquer worlds or demand tribute. Instead, it connected them. Fold gates linked thousands of systems, allowing instant travel between points that would have taken years to reach by conventional means. Trade flowed freely across boundaries that had once been absolute. Ideas spread faster than any government could control. Some of my people still fear you, Veltarok admitted. They believe the Accord is simply a different kind of empire, one that conquers through commerce instead of weapons. What do you believe? The crystalline being was silent for a long moment. I believe you have done something unprecedented. You took a punishment meant to destroy you and transformed it into liberation. You built a civilization that values connection over control, and you offered that civilization to anyone willing to accept its principles. Victoria smiled. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes, especially in the early years. Some of our colonies developed in directions we didn't anticipate or approve of. Some species that joined the Accord found that our values conflicted with their traditions. Growing pains, mostly. But you kept growing. That's what humans do. We grow, we adapt, we spread. The Council was right about that. They just drew the wrong conclusion. Our nature isn't a threat to the galaxy. It's a gift, if we use it wisely. In the cities of Earth, museums had been built to preserve the history of the Exile. The largest one stood in New Geneva, on the site where the United Nations had once debated humanity's response to the Council's verdict. Its centerpiece was a holographic recording of Ambassador Linda Price walking out of the Council chamber. That small smile on her face that had puzzled so many observers at the time. Price had died decades ago. But her words lived on. A plaque beside the recording displayed what she had told her staff immediately after the verdict. Hey, they think they've beaten us. They think exile is the end. But they've forgotten something important about humans. We don't accept endings. We just find new beginnings. 300 years later. Those words had become prophecy. Young people from across the galaxy made pilgrimages to that museum. They came to learn about the species that had been cast out and had returned to reshape everything. They studied the technology that had made it possible. The fold drives and dimensional gates that now connected countless worlds. But mostly, they came to understand the idea that had driven it all. The idea that rejection was not the same as defeat. That exile could become liberation. That the worst thing your enemies could do to you might turn out to be the best thing that ever happened. Victoria Shaw thought about those young people. As she looked out at the stars. She was 112 years old. Her life extended by technologies developed in the fold, but she still remembered being a young officer, wondering what the future would hold. She had never imagined this. What happens now? Veltarok asked. The Council grows weaker every year. Eventually it will collapse entirely. What will take its place? Nothing, Victoria answered. That's the whole point. We're not trying to rule the galaxy. We're trying to connect it. When the Council finally dissolves, there won't be any single power to replace it. Just billions of species working together or apart as they choose, building whatever future they want. Some will choose war, some always do. But they'll find that war is expensive and trade is profitable. Most beings prefer profit to glory, given the choice. She turned to face the crystalline ambassador directly. The Council wanted to contain us because they feared what we might become. They were right to fear that. But they were wrong about what we would do with our power. We don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to build connections. Ships and gates and trade routes and friendships. That's what humans have always done best. The stars stretched out before them, countless points of light representing worlds that were now linked in ways that would have seemed impossible 3 centuries ago. Somewhere out there, new frontiers were being discovered. New species were making first contact with the Accord. New ideas were spreading across dimensions that most beings still couldn't imagine. The exile had ended long ago. But humanity's story was far from over. In a small house on Earth, an old woman named Patricia Lane sat in her garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and gold. She was 340 years old, the last surviving member of the original Fold Drive research team. Medical technology had kept her alive far longer than she had ever expected. Long enough to see everything she had helped build. Her great-great-grandchildren played on the lawn, laughing and running without any knowledge of the fear that that had shaped their ancestors' lives. To them, the Exile was ancient history, a story about people who had lived so long ago that they might as well have been legends. Patricia smiled and closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her face. It was Earth's sun, the same sun that had shone on her grandparents and their grandparents before them. But it felt different now, warmer somehow, more welcoming. We did it, she whispered to no one in particular. We actually did it. The wind carried her words away across a planet that was finally, truly free.